Okay, so this past week we've been working with your students on different math concepts that they can use in and out of the classroom. We presented them with a subtraction task to gauge what kind of strategies each student would use to solve the problem. So you can see the subtraction problem here that we presented to them. We wanted to see different strategies that they would apply to this basic subtraction problem. The problem says there's 7 butterflies on a flower. 2 of them fly away. How many butterflies are left? And we use pictures as well as like manipulatives or like some visuals that they can see to help them solve the problem. So Katie can explain a little more of what we saw when we did this.
So we're going to outline 2 different strategies that we saw to solve this problem. Firstly, we saw a lot of your students applying their knowledge of part-whole relationships to the problem, which was awesome. These students basically started out the problem by recognizing this last group of 2 as the butterflies that are flying away, and they X'd these out and then used one-to-one counting to figure out how many were left over. So they physically touched the butterflies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and gave us 5 as their answer. These students demonstrated to us that they're understanding how to group numbers and how to use that to solve problems and to see different patterns within numbers. So by that I mean that they didn't need to physically touch the last 2 butterflies to know that this was the group of 2. They just were able to see these last 2 and say that's 2 butterflies without 1, 2. So that's awesome. The other strategy that we saw used to solve this problem was just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and giving us 7 as the response. These students' skills are where we expected them to be with what we do in class. A lot of kindergarten is counting sets of objects, and that's kind of these students applied their background knowledge of what we do in class to this problem. Even though they didn't give us the correct answer, it showed us a lot of positive things, like they are using their counting strategies to solve the problem. We just want to push them more towards recognizing numbers in different ways so that they can begin to build those basic subtraction skills while working on their counting skills still. So there's some different ways that we can practice counting skills while recognizing different sets of objects and different groups. Basically, we want them to start recognizing groups of objects that exist within numbers. So our first tip is that you can use at home is using real objects, and Gabby is gonna show you how this might help your students.
Yeah, so using real objects too it's a lot more easier to manipulate if you need to use your hand to cover certain objects, take away certain objects. So it's easier for them to visually see what the result is. So one thing that you can do is if they're struggling with comparing 2 groups of numbers, in our problem, as you can see, all objects were lined up in one line. So for them, it might have been kind of a struggle to see that, like to separate into 2 groups, because to them it just looked like one set. So one thing that you can do is using objects at home. You can use maybe some of their favorite toys, favorite candies, anything that they like, anything of their choice. So right now we have mints and cough drops. That's all we could really find. But so you could use, say you put 3 mints up here, and then you put 2 cough drops underneath here. 2 things, using 2 different objects, they can clearly see that these are mints and these are cough drops, so separating those into 2 different groups. And then also just using 2 lines instead of just them all being in one line can also help them identify the 2 different groups. You can work on different concepts like more than and less than, asking them how many mints we have more than cough drops. You can, like I said earlier, you can use your hand if you need to take them away so they can visibly see, okay, I have 1 left over, if they're struggling with that concept as well.
So yeah, what she just outlined helps them recognize different groups of objects in a set. Another way to do that that's a little bit more complex is to put them in one line. So I have 3 mints and 2 cough drops. You can ask your student, how many mints do I have? They might say you have 1, 2, 3. How many cough drops do I have? 1, 2. And then you want them to say, how many do we have all together? So that they're getting the part-whole relationship. Mm-hmm. Some students might struggle with the part of all together. Some ways you can help them with this is to underline with your hand, like physically underline all together so that they can see this is one total group. Also, you could, if they stopped at 3, you could say 4, 5 to kind of push them to see that. Another way you could do this is with like Legos at home, and you could have them build their own group. Say, I want you to get 3 green Legos and 2 red Legos. So then they can count out 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then you could ask them how many is that all together, and they could break it apart and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And you could practice, like taking away. Like if I took 2 away, you could take 2 of their Legos away. They could practice counting, seeing that group, seeing what's left over. So just moving like more towards just being more independent in their work and being able to do it on their own.
Yes, that's the goal. Just helping them understand different groups that exist within numbers.